Hello, everyone, and
Hello.
welcome to a very, very special edition of the Spooky Show tonight. Jay and I are very, very excited to finally be able to pin down Malcolm and get him on our show. So thank you, Malcolm, for agreeing to come on and speak to us reprobates. You know what we're like.
A pleasure.
Dan is still very ill, so Jamie has stepped into his shoes for this evening, and we're going to have a fantastic time. We got so many questions.
So much to do.
Yes, and guys in the chat, if you have any questions, please put them up, and we'll put them to Malcolm, and I'm sure he'll love to see your questions, and he'll answer them if he can. But Jamie, have you got anything to say before we start?
I'll save them before. I'll save the questions before, I think. I'll have to, when we start rolling, and then it depends on what rabbit hole we're going to go down first, isn't it? So it's it just depends, really. But I think that if we're going to talk about UFOs first.
Let's start there.
So I haven't had no experiences of UFOs. I'm quite skeptic, if that makes it sense, about seeing one, seeing the pictures, because you can see some pictures are like, is that it? It could be an aircraft, you know. So that's my thought on UFOs. You know, it's I'm quite skeptic, but I'm sure that if I saw one, I'd think, well, actually, I'll take back what I've seen, or do you know what I mean? What I'm saying, then you know I can believe it. That's actually proof that it's a UFO. You know, if that makes sense to you, Malcolm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started off in this journey, investigating ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs, lake monsters, I was a skeptic. I was, as Viv knows, I was out there to disprove these subjects. I felt there were no validity in these claims. But to answer your question, I mean, UFOs was the big one for me, Jamie. You know, the big one was back in 1979 with the Bob Taylor case, which we may come to later. But clearly, I wanted to find out if there were any validity to that case, and indeed the many countless thousands cases that's occurring here in the Great Britain on a regular basis. And yes, you're right, the vast majority of natural identifiable solutions, there's only a small percent that are very bizarre, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. A small percent could be our own black budget technology, it could be a rare atmospheric phenomena, but the fly in the ointment, and for me, it's only 1% out of 100. The fly in the ointment is this 1%, which will not go away, which we are currently trying to ascertain. They've been sighted over silos, missile silos, cutting off all the machinery and the equipment. We're talking about vehicles that can do incredible maneuvers. We saw what happened a few years ago with the release of the Pentagon, released the UFO files.
Yeah.
From the film footage taken from aircraft that was dispatched from the USS Theodore Roosevelt. These captured anomalous blips. They were called gimbal or go fast, or tic-tac. They were traveling at incredible speeds. Now, we could ask ourselves the question, is this our own technology? And if it is, we should be maybe alarmed. Is it the Chinese, Japanese, or is it something else? Or indeed, is it just, it is our own technology, and we're doing these maneuvers next to another maneuver, which was with the American Navy. They were out with all their ships. So maybe they just went into that airspace to see what the protocol would have been. And as we know, but having said that, the American government has come out quite openly saying, we don't know what these things are. That's an incredible statement. More so when you look back at Roswell, when they said it was a weather balloon or a mogul balloon and all these different things. Now they've came out and saying, we don't know what it is. Is that a cover-up? Who knows? But all I would say to you, Jamie, is, you know, go to certain locations here in the United Kingdom. It could be Warminster. It's not as big as it once was, but you'll still see strange things there. You could go to the Pennine districts. There are a lot of activity there. You could go to Bonnybridge in Stirlingshire. Try to go to these locales, these window areas, these hotspot areas, which seem to attract a higher concentration than anywhere else. And when you're there, you may well be in a good position, Jamie, to see something anomalous. And I certainly hope you do. I really do, yeah.
I think this year, hopefully, me, Viv and Daniel will go and adventure to get our deck chairs out with a cup of tea and have a look for the flying saucers. But hopefully, but just another thing, really. How comes so the UFOs don't get picked up on radar? Because it's that's quite of a thing for me, because an aircraft can get picked up on radar. So how comes a UFO can't get picked up on a radar system?
Well, I've got to say that you're actually wrong, because there have been many UFOs that has been picked up on radar across the world. And because when you look at NORAD, they have the most sophisticated anti-aircraft stroke UFO equipment in the world. They can detect these things. So they have, but the powers that be don't want that to be released, Admittedly, you can get a lot of what's known as false returns. It's weather blips, weather variations that can cause this little blip and be misconstrued as a fanciful flying saucer. But clearly on the USS Theodore Roosevelt and the other ships in that fleet at that time, they were picked up very, very fast on radar. But you're right, not them all. And it's like ghosts. Sometimes you have 5 people in a room and 4 will see the ghost and the other one will go, wow, I can't see anything.
I see what you're saying,
So it's the same.
But but they've been picking up these, I'm going to call them unidentified objects. They've picked them up going in and out of the sea, haven't they? It's not just all in the sky, but they've been going underwater. They've given them this fancy name now.
USOs, unidentified submersible objects. And that is absolutely fascinating, because these have been seen again entering and exiting the oceans of this planet, more so around the island of Puerto Rico. And a lot of ships have seen these lights bubbling up under the ocean. Now, it's not like you get shoals of fish that are luminescent. It's not that at all. These are other things. It's like pushing the waves as well, a story just came to mind here. I dealt many years ago with this guy from Glasgow. He wanted to meet myself in SPI because he had to get his UFO story off his chest. Now, he was on board a merchant navy vessel called the MV Baron Inchcape, and that was like a kind of weather ship and that. So they were out in the Pacific Ocean, and he was a radio operator, and he was just in the radio room when suddenly the third mate banged in. He says, "You'll never believe what's floating above the ocean." What are they damned UFO things? Well, don't be silly. Because a lot of hilarity and a lot of leg pulling was done on these long sea voyages just to pass the time. So he kept coming. He says, honestly. So anyway, Jim went out on the board. Beautiful starry night. The sea was like glass. And my God. It was like 2 soup plates joined rim to rim, Viv, with a red band encircling it. And it was oscillating in its own airspace. And then, puff, it shot away in the
wow.
Now, there's 2 logs at sea. One is just for natural maritime incidents and stuff. Then there's another one called Phenomena Observed at Sea. So there are 2 logbooks. I didn't know that. And when we asked if we could see that logbook, he says, that's well gone. We don't know where it's completely disappeared, And he believes since then he's had a lot of UFO experiences, and he believes he's been abducted, but that's another story.
But I think it's amazing because now I don't want to alarm anybody, but we know that the ice caps and everything's melting, and it's revealing this. It's going to reveal this new land. What else is it going to reveal? Because I think it's hiding so many secrets, and for a long time people have been saying there's something big coming. I think there's something big coming. it's going to be with our governments, the world governments, and it's going to be something else related. And I do feel it's going to be the alien thing is going to be more prevalent. I've just got a feeling,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you feel the same. Do you feel that there's something more coming?
Certainly the Arctic, you know, this landmass, this ice mass. There's only a few stations out there for research, as we know. And if they are melting at quite an alarming speed because of the temperature of the world's going up. So whether that shaves off big sheets of ice and reveals maybe something unusual, then that would be fantastic. Because if you have a base, and we're talking UFOs here again, we mentioned the oceans, there may well have been bases in the oceans of this planet, like the Mariana Trench. It's the biggest and deepest trench in the world. So what about, the Arctic Circle and stuff like that? There may well be something there.
Yeah, I feel like our governments will have no choice but to hold their hands up and say, yes, we knew about this. Because they've now already spoken about, when they're playing these sounds into space through satellites, and they've had responses. They've now admitted that something has been trying to talk to them. So it'd be interesting to see what they come up with next. It's fascinating.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
I've been asked that question many, many times. Do I believe there'll be full disclosure at some point in time? And it's a difficult one to answer because, we've been dealing with the UFO presence for nigh on millennia. It goes way back into antiquity. You can see them painted in Renaissance paintings and cave art, etc. So there is an agenda. Absolutely, there's an agenda with these wee fellas, these wee greys. And whether they're in cahoots with the military machine, America, Canada, Great Britain, who knows? There would appear to be some evidence that is so, but again, it's one of these grey areas.
Yeah. I heard, just quickly, I've got to mention this to you because I find it absolutely fascinating. I saw it, but didn't have time to take pictures because it was just, oh yeah, that's interesting, and you put your phone down. But there was some people in China that leaked photographs of the moon, and they were some very old ancient structures, buildings that they had photographed on the moon.
Yeah.
And I saw this and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I'll look at that later. And then as quickly as they went up, they were taken down. I know that there's a lot of fakery, especially over the internet. But I found that so interesting because nobody really talks about the moon anymore. And I know, like, aliens are still going there. They're still using that as for something. Even us as people, we're putting stuff in and on around the moon. What the bloody hell's going on then, Malcolm? Do you have any? Have you seen this? Have you heard of it? Or
yeah, I mean, I've seen I've seen those photographs you're referring to there, you know, and plus others of alleged structures on the moon. A lot of it's probably pareidolia or simulacrum, and what that effectively is the brain is hardwired to look at faces and shapes and make sense out of them. And it's the same with ghostly photographs, of course. Your society gets sent a lot of photographs. You go, oh, come on, what's going on here? That's nothing. The desire to believe in these things is quite immense by Joe Public, and it's understandable because it's a fascinating subject. But as for I mean, obviously we know not a great deal about the dark side of the moon. I do. I'm a Pink Floyd fan, but that's another story. And could they be using bases on the moon? That's a possibility. We should never, ever, ever throw the baby out with the bathwater because it looks crazy. It sounds ridiculous. Because what if it is? What if it's real? And this is why science must really get into our subjects. They're subjects that we love so dearly. And you can understand why they don't, simply because of peer pressure. Oh, what? You're getting involved in UFO research? You can't do that. And they may lose their role in the facility, or faculty and stuff. But clearly there's something going on. As for the photographs, you're quite right. They can be faked. We're living in the Steven Spielberg age. We can manipulate anything on computer to look like a ghost or a UFO. As I've said before, we can use the same technology to unmask that and find out if it's a piece of paper with edge pixel separation, edge enhancement. We can determine with the use of the same technology if a photograph is real or not real, which is fantastic. So it works both ways. Yeah, works both ways.
Do you think they should be making this as part of the curricula or a subject at schools? Because I think the schools are missing out on, because it's everywhere, and it sort of comes into the science. Let's talk about rocket spaceships. Now let's talk about the UFOs. Do you think that the school should be bringing that into as a fun thing to learn, for the children?
What a great question, Viv. Great question. Absolutely, I totally agree with you. In actual fact, I can safely say in hand and heart, I've actually done that. When Bonnie Bridge was big back in the middle 90s, 1990s, there was a lot of UFO sightings above this Stirlingshire town. We made a lot of newspaper press, it just happens. And this school teacher got in touch with me and said, Mr. Robinson, our class is doing a project on space and that. We would love for you to come down and give a wee talk about, your research and that. I said, yeah, I'd love to. And she says, but don't, because of primary school children, Malcolm, don't talk about wee grey men or green men, just the UFOs. I went, yeah, okay. So I went down to the school, Abercrombie School in Tullabuddy in Clackmannanshire in Scotland. Wow. And the walls was solid, all these paper mache models and some like a Blue Peter, these space models and planets hanging down. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. So I proceeded to give this talk and the class was quiet. And all these wee faces are looking up at their desks. And the teacher said to me afterwards, she says, that's the quietest the class has ever been, So anyway, I was doing this talk and this wee hand went up, wee Johnny. Mr. Robinson, yes, son, why don't you talk about the aliens? And I looked at the teacher and the teacher looked at me and she went, no. And I often think about why would that be? Because I want to tell the truth. I want to tell it as it is. That these wee buggers, and I will swear, these wee buggers, the greys, we know what they do. They abduct people from the comfort of their own homes and vehicles, and they subject them to this horrendous abduction scenario, and I don't think I may have said that to the kids, but it was, to answer your question in a long roundabout way, great idea, Viv. Yes, I agree. We should get that into schools as an added science, yeah, for sure.
You could start it off, Malcolm, and you could be like the Billy Connolly version for the UFO world for the schools, because they need it to have the comedy with it. We don't want to scare them, but because I'm finding that children are asking questions because they're seeing things.
Oh, yes.
I remember a good few years ago, there was a friend of mine said that her son had said something really odd to her and he wanted to talk to me about it. And I said, oh, okay, put him on the phone. And it was coming home from the shop. He'd gone and got some milk for his mum. And he said, and he drew a picture of it and he sent it to me. He said, I saw this standing in the park by a bush. I said, what did it do? He said, it picked a leaf off the bush.
Wow.
Looked at it, looked at me, looked back at the bush. He said, by then I decided to leg it. And he drew a grey. And he doesn't know anything about greys. I just thought, really? Wow.
Wow, that is.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, for every one kid that comes forward and puts his hand up to say, I've seen something, how many is behind them? No chance. Yes. I'm not going to say anything. That must be in hundreds, Viv,
Yeah. We'll get you, we'll start a campaign. We'll take it to our government and see if they get it added.
Well, once we have Scottish independence, I'll put my big welly boots on, Billy Connolly boots, and I'll be in all the schools in Scotland. Don't you worry.
Yeah, you'll have to get he had the banana boots, didn't he? You'd have to get the alien boots or something.
Yeah.
Just make it fun for them.
But I mean, let's be honest. It's an inquisitive minds these young children have, not just for UFOs, but for ghosts and the supernatural. And it's only right that we educate the children about what's going on.
Yeah.
To a degree, don't go way off board with the abductions and that, but they certainly have a right to learn. I mean, thankfully, we're living in an age now where we don't have just 2 television stations as we did in my day. We have an array of satellite televisions which brings forward wonderful programs. And as far as I know, there's no age limit on these programs. It doesn't come up and say not suitable for childs under 13 or something. So, yeah, we're getting there, slow but sure.
Now, I want to bring you back a little bit. I'm going to leave the UFOs there a little bit for a while. I've got to mention it because this is really exciting. I know that you've been in I can't even say the word, submarine, and you have been down to the deepest, darkest depths of Loch Ness. Yeah, How was it? And come on, tell us all about it. We're excited.
Yeah, I mean, it was a wonderful opportunity, and how it came about was that the Swatch watches were sponsoring this submarine, which is probably about 15 to 20 feet in length.
So he's talking about Ness.
And they were up at Drumnadrochit, which is on the shores of Loch Ness. And we're taking members of the public down for a few weeks at the price of like £69.50 for 1 hour. Now, the reason they were charging was that they were doing soil samples of the loch. So if you can imagine cutting a tree down, you'd see all the rings and it would tell you how old that tree is. It's the same with the penetration with this into the loch's floor. They pull that sample up, open it up, and you can see all the sedimentary deposits. So that's the reason why the submarine was there. So back in 1994, I went up there and I made myself known to the skipper and that. And I went into the submarine. Now, if you were claustrophobic, Viv and Jamie, you would not like this because it was really tiny. You had instrumentation on the walls, the dials and stuff. You had condensation running down in trickles as well. And the skipper went through the preliminary safety procedures, you know. And then the submarine had a big, large portal on the front nose of the submarine and one in the floor. Now, the one at the front had an array of strong halogen lights to penetrate the inky blackness of Loch Ness. So as the submarine left its moorings at Drumnadrochit, it went into the middle of the loch and descended. And after we went through the heavy peat-stained particles, it was clear as a bell.
Really?
It was unbelievable. And we went down to just over 400 feet. And the loch floor was sandy silt with a few rocks sticking out. There were nothing major until at one point, if you can imagine, this is the loch floor and this is the submarine. As the submarine was going over the loch floor, it just suddenly descended. It just fell away. The loch floor just fell away into a canyon. And I said,
wow,
unbelievable, you know. And I said to the skipper of the submarine, can we go down there? He says, no, we've got to stick to our allotted course. And we never obviously saw Nessie. I asked the skipper, you know, have you seen Nessie yourself? No, he said, but we have had quite a few strange, anomalous sonar returns. So that's radar to detect sonar to detect Nessie. Even a trained skipper like he was, he says, we don't know what that was. We don't know what these sonar returns were. And it was the best £69.50 I've spent in my life, but don't tell my wife.
Malcolm, I've got my little boy, he's really fascinated about Nessie. He's just asked me, what do you think that Nessie eats? Nessie, he's got one like that as well. Haven't you? So, yeah, Lucas just wants to ask, what's his favourite food?
Well, people say that there's not enough fish to sustain a colony of creatures because Loch Ness, it has more than one. But I think that's wrong. There are over 80 odd, if not more, streams coming into Loch Ness. it has a great population of fish in there. You know, the Arctic char has been found in there as well. So, but the mainstay of what's in Loch Ness is undoubtedly eels. You can get large eels in Loch Ness. That could well be a food source as well. So you've got a combination of fish, eels, and whatever else, you know. But
you happy now? Yeah. Right, go to bed. Come. So yes, and obviously, when you said about when Viv said about Loch Ness, I said, well, he's just got in from training from rugby. So I was like, quick. He was a bit too shy to ask you a question, but my question to you, Malc, is that have you got any photo evidence of Nessie? Have you actually seen him or?
Well, obviously Nessie is dear to my heart, and I can remember giving Viv a book a few years ago on Nessie.
I've got it on my shelf, yes, and it's signed.
And as a wee boy growing up in Scotland, my father regaled me with his tales of this water kelpie, Jamie, and I was absolutely fascinated. So on family holidays, we went up to Loch Ness, and it just drew me in, this vast area of water, 24 miles. It's long. It can hold the population of the world 3 times over. That's unbelievable. Who makes
in water? Yeah.
And it's the depth of Loch Ness is just under 1,000 feet. Some people say about 970. And it just fascinated me. But when I was a wee boy, we went on one of those pleasure cruisers that traversed the loch, and I had my father's binoculars, and I was only about 11 years of age or something like that, Jamie. I'm spanning the loch in hopes of a sighting, and boy, did I see it. Now, wait for the punchline. What I saw was 3 humps in the water. Absolutely convinced of it. Totally convinced of it. On reflection, as an old guy as I am now, I now realise that they weren't humps at all. What it was something known as a standing wave. Now, what that is when you have a boat travelling south and a boat travelling north, as the bows push against the water, you get this hump effect. And that has given rise to many, many false Nessie reports, more so from people coming to the loch for 5 minutes from New Zealand. Oh, no, it's not. It's a standing wave. And even when there's no boat in sight, that'll be there. You ask about photographs. I personally haven't taken any. Probably the best photographs are the ones that was taken by Dr. Robert Rhines from the Academy.
That's the famous one, isn't it? With his head poking out.
Yeah, and well, we have an underwater photograph of this large bulbous body, the long tapering neck, small head, and but what I'm not so happy about is the flipper photograph, the famous flipper photograph, because when you see that as it was, untouched, you can't make anything out. But when it was sent to the Academy of Applied Science or wherever it was sent to, it was all airbrushed, so you could see the darkness of this rhomboid diamond-shaped flipper. Incredible, with this ridge running down the centre of it. So that's a wee bit suspicious. But you got to remember, Loch Ness has many moods. You know, it can change in an instant. And you have many waterfowl, you know, swimming in there. You have seals as well, sticking their head up. If you don't know, that could be Nessie. So.
Because it is freshwater, isn't it, Loch?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
There's also been word that the same creature, same as Loch Ness, has also been spotted somewhere in Ireland. So could there be 2 Nessies? Do you think that could be credible, or are they just trying to take it away from Scotland, do you think?
No, let's be honest. I mean, when I was doing the research for my book, The Monsters of Loch Ness, it was clear to see in my research that these creatures, they are like plesiosaurs, but I doubt very, very much they're not plesiosaurs. Absolutely not, and I'll come to that later. Sightings, Viv, as you say, they were sighted all over the world, even the lochs. We call them lochs, not lochs, in Ireland. Loch Morar in Scotland, in northeast Scotland, is 11 miles long. It's probably the 3rd deepest loch in Europe, I think.
Yeah.
Harbours a monster called Morag. We love to gut colour monsters' name. There's one in Siberia. There's one in Russia. We have the famous Ogopogo in Canada. So these have been sighted now. I must say to your viewers that think about this. We're finding new species of insect on this planet on a daily basis, new species of frog, etc. So it's not out the bounds of possibility that there could be some as yet unknown, I wouldn't say monster, but creature in Loch Ness and these other lochs worldwide. We are still, before we came on air, we were speaking about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, etc., the Yeti. That's a mystery in itself, clearly.
Yeah.
A lot of people have seen that, but it's very elusive, just like Nessie. But that's why we love the subject.
Yeah.
There's been some comments in the chat, so can I quickly put them up, because it's gone mad when we started talking about Loch Ness.
Yeah.
So I've got to put them up. So Nick is in America. I forgot where in America.
Hi Nick, all the best, Nick.
And he wanted to listen to Loch Ness, and he said it's amazing. He said that he's often heard that some believe it's a plesiosaur. Bry thinks that most sightings are sturgeon.
It's a possibility, yeah.
Nick says that I've heard that while not the Loch Ness monster is one of the most famous lake monsters in the world, there are other lochs and lakes throughout Scotland, as you mentioned, and the rest of the UK that are supposedly inhabited by the lake monsters. So, yeah, you picked up on that. That was an elephant. What?
Well, I can I comment? Was it Barry who commented there? Sorry, no,
yeah.
it was
Bry.
Bry, yeah, back in the early 1930s, there was a travelling circus came up to Inverness, and they also travelled up to Loch Ness as well. Now, at that point, hardly any citizens around Loch Ness had ever seen an elephant, you know. And but the story goes that some of that travelling circus had elephants. They were in the shallow end at Loch Ness, and they were bathing, throwing water about, and people think that perhaps that gave rise to the early Loch Ness sightings, and who knows? But that's why elephants come into this scenario.
Okay.
And Nick says, wasn't that famous photo from 1933 later proved to be a fake? Is that the flipper one?
Absolutely. We call it the surgeon's photograph, and that's the most iconic photograph of Nessie. Everybody near enough in the world has seen it. You've got the long, slender neck with a small head, and all that proved to be was a toy submarine with this kind of like a plasticine model of a neck and a head, and it was pushed out into the loch. And the guy who did that, his stepson, was a guy called Marmaduke Wetherell, and he had came to Loch Ness on the back of the Daily Mail, an expedition in the 30s to prove once and for all that Nessie was real. And he wasn't getting anywhere, as most people do, but he brought this hippopotamus's foot and pressed it into the sandy bed of the shores of Loch Ness, and he made a great name for himself. Footprints of the Loch Ness monster. All it was, Viv, it was a left foot of a hippopotamus, and it was part of a tray for putting in umbrellas, like an umbrella, you know. And so he went away in shame. He left Loch Ness in shame. But since then, you know, we've had so many expeditions from Japan, Turkey, America, Canada. We've had all these. I mean, I've had my own idea to capture Nessie as well. So there's clearly, it's still a draw. It's still a draw for people.
Do you know, like on the top of like where the Loch Ness is, there's supposed to be a very steep sort of cliff. I'm going to call it a cliff. And then on the top is a white building. You know what I'm talking about? And apparently there is supposed to be the ghost of the lone piper that plays the pipes over Loch Ness. I've heard this story. Do you think when he shows himself and he does that Nessie might show themselves?
I think it's only in the cartoon, isn't it?
I think it's probably an urban myth. I mean, obviously we had the world's evilest man at one point stay at Loch Ness,
Yes.
Alistair Crowley, and he stayed at Boleskine House, and he was making all these fantastic spells, etc. And people have surmised, well, couldn't Alistair Crowley have magicked up, conjured up this evil, this serpent-like creature? I don't think so. I mean, obviously Nessie was sighted well before Alistair Crowley came to Loch Ness. But people have also said, couldn't Alistair Crowley have created what we call as a tulpa? And that's a thought forum. And the Tibetan monks have created tulpas as well. There was a famous ghost cavalier that was manufactured by the Sorat group in Canada. And they sat on seance and they gave him a life, they gave him a wife, they gave him a storyline, fictionary, complete fiction, get nowhere. And suddenly he materialized this figure called Philip. And for anybody watching the show, if you go to Philip the Ghost Sorat, you'll see all the details there.
Yeah. That's the captain who went around Loch Ness with the sonar system, isn't it?
There've been a few people that's done that as well. Yeah, with the sonar. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, Jamie. Sorry, Viv, I'm on our own. Back in 1987, Operation Deep Scan. Now, what they had was the most sophisticated boats with the most sophisticated sonar apparatus at that time. And they were all in line, and they traversed up and down Loch Ness for a number of days, and they managed to record about 4 or 5 very, very strange anomalous blips on the sonar. Now, not only was the equipment fantastic, the people behind that were great as well. They knew about the conditions of the loch, they knew for false returns, etc.
Yeah.
But they couldn't explain this. And that's the thing. Nessie it's not an air-breathing animal. Yes, sometimes on occasion its neck comes out the water. I interviewed Father Gregory Brucey back in 1986, I think it was, and he had a friend from Westminster Cathedral who had come up to Fort Augustus, which was at the southern end of Loch Ness, and he took him down to the jetty, and Loch Ness was like a sheet of glass. And he said, well, here you are, up from London, famous Loch Ness. Suddenly, as if on cue, I know this is hard to believe, the serpentine neck with a small head came up in front of a man of the cloth, 2 men of the cloth, and then just cascaded back into the bowels of Loch Ness. I interviewed Alex Campbell, who was the former water bailiff of Loch Ness. He was the man who brought Nessie into the world's domain, because back in 1933, a lady called Aldi Mackay claimed to have seen a tremendous upsurge of water with a big humped back in Loch Ness. And she drew this to the attention of Alex Campbell. Alex Campbell was a correspondent for the local Inverness Courier. He put it in the paper and it just went bang. From there, it exploded, you know. But what I don't accept is the couple or 2 or 3 sightings of Nessie on land. I don't accept that at all.
No.
I think when you look back in history, and there's many, I say photographs. It's not a photograph. They're actually drawings and sketches of not pirates. I want to say ships at sea that had these extra large animals, for example, a big octopus over the boat, or squid, or whatever.
Yeah.
Could it not be that some of those still survive? Because you mentioned how deep Loch Ness is, the caverns and stuff that's down there that is still unexplored. Could some of these creatures still survive or grow these? I want to call them giants because that's what they are. But could Nessie actually be one of these giants, these things that grow to a super size?
Anything's possible. When I was doing research for my book on Nessie, I brought to bear for the reader the early examples of what seafarers saw back in the day when they were traversing the world's oceans. You know, they claimed to have seen these big like octopus-like creatures. They also claim to have had the serpentine-like neck and this small head. And they were drawn into maps, you know, big monsters on the maps back in the day.
That's it, yeah, that's it.
So people would say, well, where are those creatures now? We have more ships traversing the seas of the world. We haven't seen them, you know. And is that because the more ships we have on the ocean, the more propeller noises? It's because back in those days, you know, it's maybe driving them further down. You'd never say never, you know, but as I say, when you look at some of the creatures, the fish that's been sighted in the deep oceans of this planet, where man can't go, they send down the remote submersible, and these photographs of these translucent fish, jagged teeth and that, it's like, what? So they're clearly things that we're still learning on a daily basis here on planet Earth. It's wonderful. We love it.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
So, Nick says, yes, Mr. Alistair Crowley, one of the most notorious masters of the occult. Sarah Louise says, hi, sorry I'm late. Margaret Allen says, excellent. Bryce says, like an eel, giant eel, maybe.
Well,
the
thing with eels is we had that Canadian scientist come over a couple of years ago where he did water samples of various parts of the loch. And whilst he never got a monster, he got lots of clear evidence of fish and mostly eels. So it would seem that they're mostly eels in the loch. I'm beginning to speculate that perhaps, and it's just a perhaps, that maybe what's in Loch Ness is some large mutated eel, which, you know, and admittedly eels don't jump up out of the water.
No.
They don't. But when you look at some of the photographs that I've got in my book, taken by others, these are eel-like creatures in Loch Ness. Very, very similar, you know. So, again, we don't know for sure.
We don't know. So I want to bring it now to SPI, and the SPI, for those that don't know, is Scottish. Is it Scottish Paranormal?
It's Strange Phenomena Investigator.
Oh, Strange Phenomena, that's it. Why am I thinking Scottish? I have no ideas because
That's all right.
It's Burns night. It's Burns night, that's why. So there's a lot of paranormal investigations that go on behind the scenes for you. You do an awful lot. People don't know how much you actually do, Malcolm. Can you talk about any cases? Are you allowed to?
I mean, obviously, it's a mainstay of any society is to get your hands dirty. And like I said at the top of the show there, that I set out to disprove all these subjects, but the evidence is overwhelming. That we're dealing with ghosts, poltergeists, etc. And whilst I would have loved to have fully researched the Spokky poltergeist back in the day, but I was only 3 years of age. Having said that, I did manage to reinvestigate it a number of times in the past decade. And, you know, are you aware of the story, Viv?
I've got the book.
So, I mean, very, very briefly, it concerned little Virginia Campbell, who was 11 years of age. She came over with her mother, Annie, from a wee place called Moville in County Donegal in Ireland. Came over to Spokky in central Scotland. She didn't want to go. So, you know, her friends were there. Our wee dog Toby was there. But anyway, she came over, and this is about November 1960. And a few weeks later, strange things started to happen. And one of the first ones, she shared a bed with her cousin Margaret. She was 9 and Virginia was 11. And the bed head started to vibrate. Then there were footsteps walking across the linoleum floor. Then there were scratching noises, and they just jumped out of bed, started to run down the stairs. And as they were running down the stairs, it was like a sound of one of those big 1960 medicine balls that you got in gymnasiums came thud, 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 down behind them. So they burst into the living room. She said to her mother and her mother's sister, something strange is happening in her room. And of course, they weren't believed. They thought they were, when the mother thought they were making this up.
Yeah.
So the mother took the two girls back to bed, and no sooner had she done so than the bedstead started to vibrate, and she could hear the footsteps as well. So, cutting a very, very long story short, and it is, she called in the services of the Reverend T.W. Lund, a local minister from Spokky, and he attended the family dwelling, and he too was observant of these noises, etc. They then got a local GP, Dr. Nisbet, and another GP, and they actually saw the bed covers rippling. It was as if you had a stone vib and you threw it into a quiet mill pond. Those ripples.
See the ripples, yeah.
And Virginia's head was on the pillow, but suddenly the pillow rotated right round.
Oh.
And a secondary pillow, which was lying next to it, nobody was there in this pillow, depressed down into the shape of a secondary invisible head. And at that point, there was this large chest. Well, it wasn't a chest of drawers. It was a long unit that stored throws and pillows, extra pillows at the side of the wall. It screeched out several inches from the wall in full view of one of the ministers and went back again. So to cut a long story short, the various members of a church from Glasgow, Church of Scotland ministers, blessed the house. Things got worse. So they decided to say, okay, what are we going to do here? So they took the little girl to another village called Dollar, about 5-6 miles away from Spokky, and it happened again. In a different stranger's house, it happened again.
Yeah.
As if things couldn't get any worse, so they did. As the wee girl went to school one day, and the teacher had given the kids an essay to do, so they were all quiet and were writing down. Apart from one little girl, and she had her forearms on the desk lid. And the teacher shouted up, Virginia, what on earth are you doing? Leave that desk alone. So as soon as Virginia took her arms off, the desk lid went up and down like that, vibrated. And a desk which was sitting next to Virginia, which was unattended, there was nobody sitting there, rose up several inches off the floor and clattered back down. And on another occasion, Virginia went to the teacher's desk. And back in 1960, you had these big, strong desks, big.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, miss, and she put her essay, her jotters down on the desk lid. And as she did so, this cane was lying flat. It was a cane that the teachers back in the day pointed at a large blackboard. It was lying flat, started to vibrate, and then it stood up vertically and started thumping down in full view of the class.
Wow.
And at that point, the table rose up from the floor. This large desk that the teacher was behind rose up several centimetres from the floor. And whereas the teacher's stomach was in the long part of the desk, it was now in the narrow part of the desk. The desk had turned near enough 90 degrees.
Wow.
At that point, the poor little school kids in the classroom were screaming their heads off, and they all ran to the school classroom door. So the teacher's got her hand on the door, and she says, Malcome, I couldn't open the door. She says it was like there was a big, heavy man on the other side.
Yeah.
You're not getting out. So she had to say to the school kids who were screaming and tears running down their face, oh, it must be very windy today. The door's jammed shut.
yeah.
As they do, like this Brody or something. And eventually she opened the door, and all the kids get screamed off into the playground. But so, as far as that case goes, whilst I was only 3 in 1960, giving my age away here, I'm only 12. I reinvestigated it a number of times after that, and I spoke to some of the classmates. Yeah, Malcome, Christ bloody almighty. We were there. We saw it, Malcome.
Yeah.
So when I gave a lecture on the anniversary, I think it was the 40th anniversary of the case a few years ago here in Spokky in Clackmannanshire, I gave it at the Spokky Hall. It was mobbed. We had to bring in more chairs. There was over 200 people were there. And I had a special guest. The special guest at the end of the night was one of the kids who was there, obviously growing up now. And I says, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest. Please put your hands together. Mentioned his name. And he came up and he told this large audience what he saw himself. So it was a wonderful end to the night. It was great.
Oh. That's amazing, isn't it? To be able to go and trace the footsteps and reinvestigate it and to actually speak to the people involved. I think that's a major thing.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's Scotland's biggest poltergeist case. There are many. I mean, for me, the best English poltergeist case, it's not Enfield, although that's a good one, is the South Shields poltergeist. Wonderful case written up by Darren W. Ritson and Michael Halliwell. And if anybody wants to know what a really good, juicy poltergeist case is, get the South Shields poltergeist. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, look, if anyone wants to contact you, Malcolm, where can they get hold of you? And I'll put it in the chat if they want to speak to you about anything.
Yeah, I mean, everything will be treated in confidence. If anybody wants to come forward with any stories of ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs, it will be treated in confidence. They can write to me. My email address is malckySpi@yahoo.com. Well, they'll probably find me on Facebook as well, and it'd be great to hear from them, yeah.
Just putting your email address in the chat. I think I've got it right. We better check it, I suppose, haven't we? I'm terrible at spelling.
That's it, Viv. Yes, you got it. Well, I'm writing my 12th book just now. It's a continuation on my Paranormal Case Files of Great Britain. It'll be volume 4. And right now I'm looking for any juicy stories of people who's had horrible ghostly experiences. Let me know about them, you know. And
I had one.
You had one recently.
I'll tell you after the show.
Yeah, because what we're trying to do at the end of the day, it's no good me having all these stories from people all over the world and just putting them in a filing cabinet. No, get them out there in book form. Yeah. Somebody somewhere will say, you know what, I've had the very same thing. I've seen the very same thing, and I need to tell that person. And it's a jigsaw. We're trying to help one another. That's what we're doing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I must admit, I came across something last year when I was out investigating with Dan. Never seen it before, never heard of it before. Happened to see 4 of them. Dan was with me, who was seeing the same. Totally terrifying. Honestly, ran away, got in a car, you know, blessed myself, got home and drank some whiskey. It was that bad. And I said to Dan, no one would believe us if we spoke about it. And a couple of weeks later, he come back to me, he said, Vivian, he says, I've been on YouTube. I've been watching this guy in America who won't go into his barn because there's this thing in his barn. He sent his wife in there with a camera because she doesn't believe in anything, you know, so he's just go in the barn and just film in the barn, which she did. She didn't see anything, didn't feel anything. She's in there in the camera, like, what's going on, you know? And she actually filmed one of the things that I saw.
Wow.
That Dan saw. And I said, you are kidding me. And he goes, yeah, she doesn't even react to it. And he said, maybe she didn't see it, but she's got it on camera. But this guy is so terrified, this big, brave ghost hunter, that he won't go in there.
You'll have to share the link with Malcolm with the YouTube, where it's on YouTube.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
You'll have to share it, so that's obviously what you guys saw. But it's so funny. The comic is so funny. I'd still like that.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I mean, us Ghostbusters, we're not heroes, you know. We're just like anybody else. And I've often said when I give lectures that probably the best piece of kit that a Ghostbuster should have is bicycle clips.
Yes.
Do you
Yes.
get it? Yeah.
I do.
If you get into a situation, at least you're covered. You've got your bicycle clips. So
Yeah.
never mind your EM meters.
No. No. Or a good pair of running shoes. That's what I say.
Yeah, I mean, it is a serious subject, but we still laugh as well. You've got to have a laugh as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, we're
definitely.
coming back to the top of the hour. So we are going to wrap it up here. I hope everybody in the chat enjoyed the show
Well,
tonight.
I have, Viv. I hope you have as well, to be fair.
Do you know what? I need to... I've still got some more questions for Malcolm, but I think we're going to have to get you back on later on this year to see what you've been up to. If you come back, that is.
Absolutely, Viv. Yeah, it'd be a pleasure to come back in the show, yeah.
But before you do go, I want to mention, guys, look out for Malcolm that's going to be coming on our TV screens, I believe, this year. I've got to say it. You've done something with William Shatner.
Yeah, I was...
Captain Kirk.
Not in person, of course.
How does it go?
Yeah, something like that. We can all do it. That's great. We're all Klingons. But yeah, it was filmed in Bonnybridge last year for the Unexplained show, hosted by William Shatner. That comes out later this year. Look out, boys and girls, for a Channel 5 documentary on Loch Ness. 3-part this year.
That'll be interesting.
So, for those in Scotland, although I'm sure you'll get it on digital television in England, there's a show coming out on Nessie as well, both of which I've managed to sneak in there and get a few words in.
Brilliant. Love it. Mate. Love it. Well,
absolutely
we will be back next week on Wednesday at our usual time at 8 o'clock. Next Tuesday on Things Network. But tomorrow night, I believe you have the fantastic Lois and Nick for, I think it's called now, To the Grave and Back, or something. I think it's called. It's part of a crime show anyway. And Friday night you'll have Frighteners as normal. So keep checking into the network and see what's coming up. But I want to say a big thank you, Malcolm. It's been
me too.
An absolute honour and a pleasure. And we got to
thank you, Malcolm.
No problem. It's been great, and I just love talking about this subject. I could speak about it for hours, as you probably.
Well, we could as well, but we ain't got enough time.
But before we go, for all those Billy Connolly fans, will you just say for me, and a wee jobby? Because it's better when you hear a Scottish man saying it.
There was a murder, and there was also near the murder, there was a wee jobby.
I'm happy now. We'll see you guys next week. Take care, everyone. And if you can't